Okay, so welcome to the 2020 edition of the Wagon project. Since I can't show you last year's version, so I'm gonna just go through. There's two things that you'll find currently on Classroom. One is our project info sheet, which I will be transferring this information into the quest log later today. But for your information, I'm gonna link to this either way, so it doesn't really matter whether or not it's in the quest log. But so we have that, and also you're gonna need this project 2 wagon start file. So this file right here is the file that you will be building your wagon in. And a quick note, the reference images that are in that file, that is for the demo part 2 that I will be doing on Monday, because it's separated into two parts, making the wagon and then making the wagon covering. Okay, so let's explain. So our project, in the end, we're going to have a wagon that looks like this, and then we are going to add a covering that looks like this. So you're doing one and then the other. Okay, so we're making this wagon, and then we are going to use this to put a covering on it, and we are doing that on Monday. Okay, so please do not jump ahead. You will basically be wasting your time if you try and jump ahead. So let's just discuss really briefly what I'm asking you to do. So you're using this reference image for our wagon. Okay, so this is the kind of wagon we're trying to make. Simple and straightforward. Must be built in the provided Maya scene. Okay, check. 4 wheels attached to the axle by snapping to the vertex in the middle of the cylinder. So basically what I was showing you yesterday, we're going to snap those wheels using the snap to vertex principle. Chassis is built from multiple duplicated rectangular prisms built from a single poly cube. That is a fancy way of saying you should just be duplicating your building materials so that they all have the same length, width, and height. So that way, if you make quote unquote a 4x8 or whatever, or a 2x8, for the side of your wagon, that same shape that you're designating as your board, you just duplicate that board multiple times so that everything has the same shapes. Chassis built symmetrically across the axis of symmetry in the middle of the base. So basically what I'm saying is make sure you're building things symmetrically, both across an axis, and if necessary, you can snap things to a line of symmetry down the middle of the base of your wagon. So basically what I'm saying is you can cut an edge loop through this if you need to. Wagon needs to have a seat, so you need to build this little seat. I'll show you how to make it. It's really simple. It's just some cubes all slapped together. Please note, the 3 wrought iron flourishes on the side are not required. So these little things here, I'm saying you just ignore them. If you want to mess around and add them once you're done with the rest of the chassis, go right ahead. I don't care. Now, one thing to note, folks. Please note that the wheels, there's this little round, this axle here. This is what passed for shocks back in the day. Okay, this is just a piece of metal that's bent in a half circle, and that's how you absorb hitting a rock and stuff. So yeah, you felt everything that you hit. And then there's these, underneath them, you have these axles that just spin there, and then attached to those are our wheels. So getting into the Maya portion, you're going to need to download this whole file that I've given you, this p2wagon.zip. You can just click on it, hit this download button here. When you download it, you'll just need to uncompress it, so you should end up with a wagon.zip file. And then you just open it up, you'll get this P2 wagon folder, and inside of that you'll see the 3 reference images. One is just straight up the wagon, and then the other 2 that I cut to make our reference images inside. I want to note, because this happens every year, we're not following this. There's a reason why I went and cut it off from your pictures. Do not follow what you see on these pictures. We are just using these for the reference for the width and length of our canvas coverings, okay? What's up?
So basically those little frames are just to let you think of like what you could possibly make with that idea of like.
No, we're gonna directly reference just the covering part at the top, but not. I'm talking about we're not using this as reference. That's why I cut it off. So we don't want to make this. We just make this. All right. So once you open that Maya file open into Maya, you'll see that you have your reference images. I just put a green plane there. If you want to add some terrain or whatever, cool. You can delete it if you want. It is selectable if it's in the way, but. It is directly on top of the grid, as you will notice as well. So, anyway, just note you can delete this if you don't want it, but it does kind of class the joint up a little bit. Okay, so what are we making to start? We're going to make the sides of our wagon. So we got 1 piece of wood, 2, and then 3. Our bottom piece of wood, however, is longer than the others and also slanted at one edge. Okay, so let's start by making just this plank of wood up here. Alright, so I'm going to just take a rectangle, and honestly, the size does not matter to an extent when it comes to the thickness. Just make it kind of narrow. Lengthwise, however, I'm going to press spacebar and spacebar, come into my width. And essentially, what I'm going to do is just scale this, make it longer. And because this is where my covering is going to meet, I'm matching it with my covering. And I'm just trying to get it relatively close there. And boom. Okay, cool. All right, so now I have this single plank of wood. If I go into my front view, I'll also see, you can push this here. And yeah, okay, cool. So don't follow this slant, folks. Just straight up and down is A-okay. All right? So what I'm going to do next, Command D to duplicate. Whoops, I selected the wrong thing. Just move this on down. The gap is fine, but don't put a huge gap because these are technically planks of wood. So you can just put a little gap there. That's number 2. Then duplicate again. And I'm just pulling this down. Come back into my side view. Alright, cool. Now let's go back to our reference. Our bottom one, not only is it longer, it is slanted at this side. So let's take a look at this. What I'm going to do is I'm going to switch into my face selection mode. I'm going to grab this face and just pull it forward. Whatever reasonable distance is A-okay because this length isn't marked on our other references, so you don't need to worry about it. Now, you do not, however, want to then make that slant by rotating this face because you'll notice that it's slanting this whole thing down and therefore creating this gap here between them. So in order to create this slant on the front, what you're going to do, what you're going to do is switch instead into your edge mode. You just grab this top edge here, and then you'll just pull it forward. So, again, what I just did is pulling it back, switch into my face selection mode, bring the face forward, then switch to edge mode, grab the top edge, and pull that forward more to create this slant. Alright, so now I got one side done. And what I'm going to do now is use my grouping function, which we learned about in our notes yesterday, or one of the notes this week. So Command G as in group. Now I have done you the great favor of having this built around the x-axis, or the z-axis, pardon me, right on the origin. So it's following the natural z-axis here. My group's pivot point automatically is set to the origin. And what I'm going to do now is Command D to duplicate my group. And then I'm going to scale it -1 on the Z, I believe. Oh, no, I was wrong. On the X. On the X. Boom. Symmetrical flip. So again, what I did, I selected these 3 boards on this side. Group. The group sets the pivot point back to the origin. Command D to duplicate that group and change your group scale to -1. And now it's flipped over your axis. All right. So now we got 2 sides done. All right, so let's take it a step further. Let's make our boards that go across the back. So I'm going to go ahead and duplicate this one board. And what I'm going to do is, just to double check, I'm going to make sure that modify center pivot. Okay, so my pivot didn't move. It's right in the center of this object. And I'm going to hold X to snap to the grid and snap it to this grid point back here that is on the Z axis. Because now I can just go rotate this on my Y 90 degrees, get it going that way, bring this up and forward, and let's see. All right, so that looks about even. And then I'll just scale this in back towards the center now. All right, cool. Duplicate that again now that it's fit. And again, we're just eyeballing it. Command D one more time. Boom. All right. So now I'm just going to grab these 3. Command G to group them. Command D, duplicate. I'm just going to modify my center pivot on this group and just bring it forward. So now we have these faces on the opposite side, and these faces on the back. We need to add this board here and a board underneath, and then we can start adding our wheels and axles. Okay, so for our board here in the front, we're more or less going to do the same thing that we did to create this slant, which is I'm going to duplicate this board. And no, you're not going to rotate the object, because you'll see that leaves this edge slanted as well as this edge. And if we look at our reference, it's flat. So what we need to do instead of rotating the object, just like we grabbed the edge here, we're going to grab the face on top and move that face forward instead. And now it creates this more or less rhombus shape. Rhomboidal prism. I don't know if that's a word or not, but and then so now we got all of our chassis pieces minus our base and our seat. So let's add a platform to this. I'm just going to make a new cube at this point because it doesn't need to match this stuff. And whoops. There we go. Scale this up and flatten it down. Probably a little more. And then scale it in. Now if we go back, check the tape, or in this case the picture, you'll see that there's a little bit of fringe on the back and the sides, but not in front. So I'm going to get it as close as possible. Let's go into my front view here. Let's bring this up. And let's scale it in a little bit more. All right, cool. Let's go into this view. And we'll scale it in this way as well. Cool. And then over here, we're just going to go ahead, go into our perspective view. Grab this face on the front and just tuck it back so that it's flush with the front here. And now we have our platform base. Okay. So now we just need to add the seat. I'm going to duplicate this. We'll use this for my seat. Just bring it back. Boom, boom. So just needs a seat. This is actually not a triangle. Everyone always asks me about this. You will notice that there is a flat face here, which makes this just a weirdly shaped quadrilateral prism. So you can see there's a little front face there. So first, let me get my seat back the right size, scale it in a little bit, duplicate this, and I'm going to rotate it forward. So in this case, it's 90 on the X, 90 on the Z, and 0 on the Y. And again, we're just eyeballing here. So I'll bring it forward like this. Let's take a look at my seat. So my seat's longer. Okay, not a problem. So I'll grab face mode, just pull this out. Great. I'm going to duplicate my seat back again and rotate it around. I'll set it back to 0 on the Y. And I'll move this object forward and over here. Then what I'm going to do is take this front face, push it back, switch to edge mode, grab this top edge, push it down, and there is the side of your seat. And then flip it across by, I'm going to just duplicate it, put the duplicate in a group. So the group's pivot point is over here. Same thing we did with our sides. Scale in the X, -1, symmetrical flip. To add the little connector things, you don't have to get too fancy with it. I just suggest using. So I'm just taking this, flatten it out a little bit, bring it up, over. Oh, you know what? I'm going to delete this. You'll see why in a second. Because I'll just do this here. Grab this, whoops, face on top. We'll just push it straight up. Boom, inside of there. Again, this part I don't really care that much about, so I'm not expecting you to match the picture that much. So what I am going to do though is grab this face on the bottom, push it down so that it touches the bottom of the, or inside. So now I just have this, and then I'll just take this and this. So this is the reason why I deleted this, because I'll duplicate these, group them both together, and then that way I can flip them symmetrically at the same time. So that'll save you guys a step. Alright, we got a seat. We got a wagon chassis. Now we just need to add some axes and some wheels. So let's start with making the axes. Okay, so what I'm going to start with is using a pipe. And I'm going to rotate it 90 degrees on the Z. And move it up. So before I do anything else to this, I open up my poly pipe inputs. The radius, the thickness, excuse me, I want to set to 0.1. Okay, doesn't need to be super thick. I'm gonna just thin it down using the scale tool, and I'm simply just gonna flip into face mode, go into my side view here. Cut the top part off, delete it. Boom. And I'm just going to take this, hang it in here, and go to my side. So these are for my wheel axes. I'm going to scale this down because this is a little bigger than I needed, and scale it out. Alright, so about there. So we're looking here. It's okay if they get a little elongated like how I scaled it. So about there. And then we'll duplicate this, bring it back. And then, oh, so I'm going to grab both of them in this view. Oh! Oh, no, I left the background pictures selectable by you guys. Don't move your background pictures, folks.
No, don't worry.
If you do, well, I mean, if you do it, you're going to have to, you're matching your pictures. Don't do it, though. Okay, so I move these axles over a little bit. And then we got those there. Good, good. I'm just going to duplicate them, group them, scale X, -1, boom. All right. Let's just grab a cylinder. Scale tool, scale it down, make it thin. Y-axis, make it kind of long. Scale it down again. So this axle doesn't need to be huge. Whoops. Rotate tool on the Z, I'm going to rotate it 90 degrees to get it going horizontal. We'll pull it up. Go into our side view. Try and get it lined up with the bottom here. Bottom middle. Doesn't need to be perfect by any stretch, folks. And then let me go lengthen it out from this direction. So get the wheels out to there. All right. So now just go into my side view here. Duplicate, move tool. And again, we're just eyeballing. Nothing needs to be super perfect. Okay, cool. So now I got my two axles. I have shocks, I have axles. Now let's make a wheel. Okay. So just like I showed you yesterday, we're going to start with a pipe. I'm going to take my pipe thickness again down to 0.1. And I'll lift this up. Scale it down to make it nice and thin. I'm going to also increase my radius. Radius of, let's see. That seems pretty big. 2.5 seems good. I don't really care specifically the size of your tires as long as they're big enough. I don't want to see tiny tires on your wagon. And I'm just going to, for the time being, move this out here so it's not underneath. Oh, you know what? I'm going to leave that there just for sake of ease, because when I put this cylinder in there, just looking at it from the side view, I'm going to scale this down. I'm going to take this and hold X and snap it back down to my grid point. So now I know these both share the same point as their midpoint, the origin here. Okay, so that's going to allow me to, now I'm going to take these, I'll move them both out here. So now I can get them out of the way. And what I'm going to do now is, let's see. Oh, I keep telling you to move it out from under your thing. Just don't listen to that part, because I'm being dumb. Just leave it here. It's going to be easier if you just leave it here. So now I'm going to make my spokes. I showed you one method of making them yesterday, but this actually is easier. I wasn't thinking clearly. So if you actually just make your spoke go through your entire object, you only need 4 of them. So I'm going to rotate this on the Z-axis 90 degrees, get them going flat, and then all I need to do is now scale this on my Y until it goes inside both sides. And then duplicate, rotate on my X, 45 degrees, duplicate again, rotate it 90 degrees, duplicate it one more time, 135 degrees. Now you got your wheel done. So I'm going to select this, deselect my ground, and now I'm going to put this in a group, Command G. And now the pivot point's in the center of this. I'm going to rotate it, where are we at? 90 degrees on the X, and switch to my move tool. Oh, and rotate it 90 degrees on the Z, I want to say. No, on the Y. There we go. And let's go ahead and hold V for snap to vertex. and I'll snap it over here, and then zoom in and double check. I'm gonna press my 4 key, so we're in wireframe mode. Just get in here nice and close. I want to snap to that. You can also, if you're not comfortable with this, you can use the X-ray mode. I don't necessarily know if that makes it easier on you. In fact, it might. I think it actually legit makes it harder. Okay, let's go back to wireframe mode. I'm just gonna snap, holding V, grab the center of my manipulator, snap it to the end of the axle. I'm gonna press 5 or 6, excuse me, because you want your textures. And there you have it. My wheel is snapped on. Also, what I'm gonna do is scale my wheel up so that it's touching the ground on the bottom. There we go. And so what I'm gonna do now is I'll duplicate this, and I'm gonna take this duplicate group, do the same thing. I'll snap it back here, and I'm gonna zoom in back here, hit 4, holding V for snap to vertex, grab the center of the move manipulator, snap it to the end of my axle, and I'll hit 6 again. And there are my wagon wheels. And then I'm gonna just select this disc and shift click this disc. And if I hit the up arrow, then it's gonna select both of those groups. And I'm gonna say, hey, let's group you up again. And now I can duplicate that group, scale X -1, bam. And now you have a wagon chassis worthy of putting a covering on it on Monday. So that's it. You know, only a short 26 minutes of a Maya professional doing it. So, you know, it might take you 7 days. All right, so that's it. Once you have this, you're going to want to sit tight for the part 2 version where I cover making the wagon covering. Do not go ahead. You will not do it the way I want it done. So don't hop ahead. Just get here. All right.